I wanted to go through step by step what I think Trump has been up to in terms of systematically removing every obstacle that could stand in the way of he and Elon Musk's brazen, illegal power grab coup. So we should have taken one of the first actions in his very first week in office, which happened in the dead of night, as a real warning of where we were headed and how quickly things would descend. So he, in the dead of the night, in that first week, fired 17 different inspectors general across the whole of government. Now, inspectors general's whole job is to serve as a watchdog in the agencies where they're appointed. They're meant to be non-political. They have investigated both Democratic and Republican presidents and administrations. They're supposed to be above the fray. And so what does he do? First thing, he removes almost all of those independent watchdogs who could give us, the public, some insight into just what the hell is happening at all of these agencies. And at the time, when they were fired, one of those inspectors general, a guy by the name of Mark Greenblatt, who was actually originally appointed by Trump during Trump's first administration to the Department of Interior, he issued a dire warning. He said, and I quote, "This raises an existential threat with respect to the primary independent oversight function in the federal government." An existential threat. But of course, we know that Trump didn't stop there. That was just the beginning. We've just recently gotten word that he has now fired the top government ethics official. This is the person who is supposed to be specifically looking at corruption, conflicts of interest, violations of the law within the White House. That person is now gone. So now you have no one watching the White House and no one watching any of these agencies to give us insight into what is happening right now. But of course, that is not all. He is also taking control over the FBI and the Department of Justice to use both of them as his personal goon squad. So we know from reporting over a long period of time that he has been purging and firing anyone who is seen as disloyal within either of those bodies. He's putting into place at the FBI Kash Patel, who has a whole list, an enemies list of people that he intends to go after. And we also received word that the White House has changed a rule so that they say now they can talk to the Department of Justice about any and all criminal investigations. Now, it has been long-standing practice that there is supposed to be a wall between the Department of Justice, which is supposed to be acting independently as the top law enforcement agency, and the White House, so that there is no sense that this Department of Justice is just being used as political arm. Trump is throwing all of that out and saying this is going to explicitly be weaponized by me against my enemies. That's the purpose of getting rid of those rules that put into place a separation between the Department of Justice and the White House. So you've got all the inspectors general out, you've got the top government official out, you've got the DOJ and the FBI in a position to be weaponized as Trump's personal goon squad, and certainly not to investigate him or anybody in his administration. So who else could stand in his way? Well, in his first administration, there were a few Republicans who were actually dissenters on some of his worst excesses. You remember John McCain, who blew up his horrible healthcare deal, et cetera. Most of those people have already either retired or lost in primaries. They have mostly been drummed out of the party. But in case there was anyone, maybe a Susan Collins, maybe a Lisa Murkowski, who was thinking about potentially dissenting, Elon Musk has threatened them all with funding to the tune of millions of dollars, primary challenges against any Republican senator or member of Congress or governor or mayor for that matter, who would dare dissent from Trump and Elon and the things that they want to do. And of course, this has already proved effective. It actually flipped Joni Ernst, senator from Iowa. She was looking like she was going to vote against Pete Hegseth, who is now installed as the Secretary of Defense, was looking like she was going to vote against him. Elon threatened the primary challenges. Lo and behold, she flips. So the Republicans certainly not looking like they will be any roadblock or obstacle to anything that Trump wants to do. The media, there was a fierce resistance within the media. Now, I had some issues with the way that was approached last time around, but there's no doubt that there was a lot of scrutiny. There was a heightened sense of the stakes in the first Trump administration. So, in order to get the media under wraps as well, Trump's FCC, that's the Federal Communications Commission, they have been going after media outlets that have been critical or run afoul of Trump. Trump himself has launched just brazenly frivolous lawsuits against any number of media organizations. And effectively, this is like a threat. If you don't do what I want you to do, then I'm going to sue you. There's going to be retribution through government actions. Maybe I'm going to block your big merger, whatever it is you want done. The FCC is going to investigate you. And many of these media organizations have already bent the knee and effectively paid Trump a bribe, settled those lawsuits, even though they were frivolous, paid him a bribe in the hope that he would leave them alone. And I know you guys, if you're watching the headlines, if you're seeing the coverage of this brazen coup and power grab, you can see how muted the language, the headlines, the coverage. That's not to say there aren't journalists who are doing fantastic work, but the mainstream press is really failing to convey the big picture of what is happening here. And that is in and of itself a dire threat to the American public and to the democracy. Who does that leave? The Democratic elected officials have, with a few exceptions, been pretty cowed, pretty rudderless, really don't know what to do, sort of given up before they even put up a fight. So as of now, I wouldn't count on them for much of anything. That leaves the courts, and you can see the way that Trump and Elon and JD Vance and a bunch of other Republicans have been attacking the courts, threatening to just not listen, not comply with completely lawfully issued court orders against their brazenly illegal actions. So that's going to come to a head. We'll see what happens there. And then the very last barrier is just the resistance of the people. And that's what I have up here. One really hopeful sign is that since Trump's election, there's been a 3,900% increase in calls to Congress. Apparently, 1,600 calls per minute. You can see that right there. Usually, apparently, they get 40 calls per minute. The switchboards are having a very difficult time keeping up. So that is one indication that a wave of mass resistance is rising. You can also see some of the local, like indivisible groups. These are local activist groups. They're reporting that their meetings are being flooded with hundreds of people who want to know what they can do and are not really getting guidance from, elected Democratic officials. So they are showing up. You see protests popping up all over the country in different places. I think this activity is only going to increase because this is what we're left with. It really is up to the people, and the people are starting to take a stand.